Welcome to episode number 250 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast. We are recording on October 20th, 2024. Yes, Kyle, we're a couple minutes late. My name is Eric, host of the show. I'm based in Southern Ontario, hunter, target shooter, ham radio operator, and computer geek. As a first responder, witnessed an over-reliance on emergency services during major events. Started a small preparedness company to help people get better prepared for at least 72 hours, if not longer.
My name is Ian. I'm not sure if I'm a homesteader anymore. I'm just down to chickens only. But anyways, I'm on Vancouver Island, and the CBC tells me everything is fine despite the bad weather news and everything else.
Sorry, who are you? How did you get here?
I'm a new guy. I'm just trying out this whole prepper thing. It's kind of a new thing for me. But
yeah,
gotcha.
The intern.
Life
I was
straws.
going to say,
Check
I
them
thought
out.
he was the intern.
Episode 250. That's a good number. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's a good number.
Yeah, done well. I'm Jeff. I'm based in Central Ontario. I'm a target shooter, ham radio operator, general overall handyman, and the weather nerd.
And I'm Brad. I'm in Eastern Ontario, part-time amateur prepper, constantly trying to better myself.
And I'm the Frugal Gunny. I'm an off-grider, a shooter, hunter, fisher, gatherer, trapper type, and a generalist. And it's only fairly recently that I came to accept that I'm a prepper. I encourage and live a mobility approach to survival.
Can you say only recently now? You've been on the show quite a bit.
Yeah, I suppose. All right.
Just
well,
saying.
I'm going to have to modify that line. Right?
ship has sailed.
But I'm still almost in denial that I'm a prepper,
Fair enough.
If you want to help support the show, buy some swag. We have both the Canadian Prepper Podcast t-shirt and the Tactical Velcro patch at prepperpodcast.ca. All of the proceeds help cover our podcast costs.
And if you're enjoying the show, please take a few minutes and submit a review wherever you found us. We want your feedback, even if it's bad. We also invite you to reach out and tell us about something you learned this week. You can email us at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca.
Wow, the intern knocked that out beautifully. Well done. We've got some powerful content for you in this episode.
Practice,
This is has he though? He hasn't been here. So we've got some powerful content for you in this episode. Yeah, the terrible dad jokes just continue right into episode 250. We're going to start with some relevant news articles. We'll update you on what we've done for our personal preps. We're going to get into the main topic, and we're expanding on solar power. Let's move into the news.
Okay, nobody panic. There's an atmospheric river.
Uh-oh.
Anyway.
What?
Yeah. Of course, they used to call them pineapple expresses. That's offensive to pineapples or something.
Yeah,
Can't just call it a rainstorm, but now it's got a fancy term. So anyway, we had 4 inches of rain over the last day. And yeah, fun and games. I guess they closed the highway to Tofino, so Trudeau has to fly into his surfing adventures, I guess, versus drive. And, random other stuff like that. We had a bunch of ferries cancel. I don't know, flights cancel. Going size, but it's all getting better now. Actually, blue skies as of an hour ago, so I guess the crisis is over.
The real question is that internet inches or realistic inches?
That is legit inches. It's it's a thing. It's 100 millimeters of rain, which is roughly 4 inches.
But just so you know, that was all fabricated to happen that day because that was the election day.
Right.
Here we go.
HARP or something.
Oh,
yeah,
boy.
I don't know. Some atmospheric
Yeah.
seeding. I don't know.
Yeah. I just had to do it. Yeah.
Yep. Conspiracy theorist Jeff. Here we are.
Yeah.
I was
Where's my
going to say
tinfoil
weather
hat?
nerd.
I'm going to have to make one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I've got a couple articles. First one. So Cuba, they have had a total collapse of their power grid. The whole country, 100 or I don't know what's there, 8-9 million people there, something. Yep. Anyways, they have tried unsuccessfully to reboot the grid. I believe they're on shutdown number 4 now. It comes back, then it goes out again. This isn't. It's not new to them to have blackouts and stuff like that with their crappy infrastructure, and of course with all the sanctions that the U.S. has slapped on them, they can't get parts, they can't get, which the say whatever you want about it. The people shouldn't be in that position just because of the government, but hey, it is what it is. So yeah, it says Cuba's electrical grid collapsed again Sunday, the fourth such failure in 48 hours. I'll talk about it a touch in my weather blurb, but part of the big problem is they're about to get smacked with a hurricane. And I'm assuming most people, the communications are out, so they don't have radio, and they don't know that this is coming. So it's going to get interesting, I think.
Yeah, that's crazy. I thought it was bad enough that they had just lost power in the entire country. I had no idea there was a hurricane heading their way too. That's
Same here.
that's not good.
Nope. Yeah, I'll talk about it in the weather blurb, but it was a pretty interesting thing that happened. And still going on a little bit about the weather. There are still 100, and this kind of goes back to our last podcast. There's still 100,000 people in Western North Carolina that still don't have access to safe drinking water.
Wow.
There was that much significant damage to pumping stations, piping, you name it. So, of course, now the big concern is waterborne diseases, malnutrition, all that kinds of stuff. So there's lots of help there. None from the government, or very little. According to most people, say they haven't even seen FEMA around, but that's a political thing for maybe tomorrow night. But yeah, so as we talked about the last episode and the importance of water and having access to water, it's been what, 20, I think it's day 23 now since the hurricane. And yeah, 100,000 people still don't have safe drinking water.
Wow.
Crazy.
Wow.
Almost
Yikes.
like our show was timely, isn't it?
Mhm.
Almost like we
In
plan them
today's
around world
day and
events.
In today's day and age, power is everything.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, electricity is everything.
It truly
Yeah.
is.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
right.
Reading a post not too long ago, they were going on about if the electricity went down here, how long do you think you could go? And to test yourself of go a day in the summer. No AC, no refrigeration. Well, you can use the fridge, it just ain't on. So whatever refrigeration is in there is all you got, and see how long you could last, and make a list of what all you would need to go for the day and longer, and start to prepare for that and build upon that as to what you need, and try to get up to like 2 months.
Can I
thought
use
it
my
was a pretty good
generator?
I think it's a great one.
That is a good one.
Yeah.
All right. With
So-
that, how about we move along to what we've done lately for preps? We kick off with Brad.
Bit of fuel rotation in the last little while. Yeah, lots of yard cleanup before that old man shows up that we know is coming soon.
Is that Santa Claus?
A little bit before him, the older man. That's not red, and that
Gotcha.
winter shithead.
Aha, yes, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
Change the filter in the furnace. Put a new Berkey filter in, the one right there.
Very nice.
Unplanned tire change on Friday due to a blowout that I shared with the guys here on the panel. That
That was impressive.
It was.
My
You did it
brother-in-law's
right.
My brother-in-law's a
You did it right.
mechanic. He's seen a lot of stuff. I showed him that picture on our Zoom call this afternoon, and even he was like, "That was a good one." Camper almost shut down, almost completely shut down. I had a bit of a flood in my camper because of a broken pipe when I was trying to flush the black water tank. So that was not good. A couple of hours of cleanup, and it's still not completely dry, using some space heaters and the furnace on board to dry it all out. Completed my first round of building and testing the portable emergency light box that I was talking about the last time I was on, and I sent a picture of it to Claude, and Now I need to solder. I need to learn how to solder now because some of the connections are going to need it and be a little bit more robust and whatnot, but in due time. But
Great project.
that was my week.
Learn a new skill.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Nothing wrong with that.
YouTube
Yep.
University. Here I come.
Oh, yeah.
So, along with what Brad did, I closed our trailer down for. Actually, I put down for the summer, but it was for the winter. So, blew all the airlines out, got everything all done, antifreeze in the traps, and all that kinds of stuff. So, I brought the spare generator home because I keep my spare generator down at the trailer for the summer. So, while I brought that home, I thought perfect time to just test it and make sure it works. I hadn't tested it for a couple months, so everything went well, and I'm good to go. And hopefully, I
Very
don't need it.
nice. Fingers crossed. Well, common thread here for me. Checked out my generator, did my usual inspection, and found an oil leak. And this is the whole home standby generator. So that was fun. Decided to try and figure out where the oil was coming from, and found out that there's actually a known issue with the model that I have, and had to tear the thing down to get at the breather box where there's a couple of screws that have backed off that has been allowing oil to drip out of the crankcase. So that was fun. I know how to tear the thing down now, so I got to get a few gaskets and test my memory in a couple of days when I put the thing back together. So hopefully, the way things usually go, at least in the past, when I put things back together, I re-engineer it and I have a few bolts left over or screws or whatever.
So
I was just about to say, make sure that you don't have any screws left over.
Yeah, exactly. Just a couple bolts left over. It is what it is, right? It just means I re-engineered it and made it faster, which means probably puts out more power at that point, right? That's how that works. And then besides that, just started fuel rotation. So I usually do that as the seasons change. I take any of the old gas cans that I've got that have any fuel in them, dump them all in the truck, and I just grab fresh for the season coming up. So that was it for me this week.
Right on. Well, before I forget, speaking of soldering irons, I actually this week picked up a soldering iron from Amazon that's USB rechargeable and cordless.
Mm-hmm.
And
got one of those.
Handy little tool for sure. So, because I had a couple things for the ham radio stuff I was kind of tinkered with that needed a soldering iron, and I have the plug-in one that's not really thrilled with, but I thought I'd try this one, and it seems to work okay. So it heats up real fast.
Is it a Frog Bro by chance?
It is I can't read in the characters that it's in, but it's you can guess where it's made. It just says soldering iron. So
gotcha.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I guess it's been a while since I've been on. I mean, I'm not gonna drown out in preps, but a couple of changes have been going on around here. So we actually ended up having to go get rid of our last alpaca because of the protection dog is kind of going a little bit senile. So he stopped protecting the alpaca. The alpaca was kind of left alone. So we ended up rehoming him to another lady that had a few, plus a baby deer to hang out with. The livestock protection dog is basically now homebound, and he's kind of afraid of rainstorms and the dark and rain and gunshots and everything. So he just spends most of his days inside now. But it's fine. House has never been safer. Yeah, I guess I processed out a bunch of male chickens. So the freezer's full of those. I think since the last time I was on, had a few more deaths in the family for the chickens. So now we're down to maybe total 15 chickens left. That's it for the homestead. I mean, there's not really a whole lot left. Yeah. So other than that, been doing a bit of inventory, trying to figure out what we have, and a shockingly large amount of spam that I need to somehow deal with. So I guess we're making some spam sushi or something. That's a thing. Fuel rotation, of course. It's that time of year. I was on vacation for the last couple of weeks, which was my first one in 6 years, so that was kind of enjoyable. Came back sick, of course, because cold weather. I managed to pick up a mini Jackery for the next camping trip, which was on sale. Amazon, I think, had that one on for like 40% off or something. It was crazy. Anyway, so I got a little 300 water for the camping trip, and we got 1,000 water for the house, and which ties in nicely to the solar episode this week. And I think, as far as major accomplishments go, that's pretty much it.
Well, that keeps a fella busy.
Yeah.
No CGN deals though. I'm a little disappointed.
Well, I did, but they're all just sales, and there's no purchases, so nothing exciting. But actually, I was shocked as you do your inventory how much stuff you end up finding that you can sell off for 20, 30 bucks, 30 bucks here, and before you know it, you can actually finance another project just by selling off the little odds and ends. Because I mean, like even game bags I had and a couple other things that I just managed, I was never going to use, and so I just got rid of the things, and yeah, it turns into a pile of cash real fast. It's Facebook Marketplace. It's a thing. It's definitely
It is.
and now that I'm allowed back on there, I can actually use it, which is kind of cool. So
You're unbanned, are you?
yeah, it was 5-year ban or something. I don't know what happened, but I was allowed back on. So I thought, oh, I better make use of this, and I managed to decrapify a whole bunch of stuff around the house and finance all sorts of new fun stuff like jackeries. So
Nice.
Very nice.
Totally a new Ian, because old Ian would not talk about Facebook Marketplace. He would only talk about CGN.
Anything meta, I'm all over now. I'm so pro Zuckerberg right now. I just can't say enough about him. Good stuff.
Does he have a lifestyle?
Yeah. You notice I don't have the camera on. I'm not the real Ian, right? Like I'm just
No.
That's the
How's it
AI
going,
talking,
Alan?
Right?
yeah.
We got a stand in.
I'm just hoping. Hopefully, my party works out here in the BC elections. You know, I'm just really pulling for them. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Nicely.
Green all the way.
Oh, geez. Well, sticking around the solar theme, I did get to start fooling around with my Anchor Solix, the C300. Pretty good little product so far. Easy to tote around. Charging is really simple. Great functionality. You almost don't need a manual. So that's a pretty good product when you don't need a manual. And no, I've not connected it to the web yet. I just don't need the firmware update that badly yet. I'm testing it as it is before I connect.
Manuals? What is this thing you speak of, manual?
It's the thing you use to start your fire, right?
Oh,
Yes.
the fire starter that comes with every product I buy. Right.
That's right. Yeah. So that was fun. So I actually use that to go up to the cabin because when you're decommissioning your entire solar gear, it turns out to be really useful to have a power source and some lighting. So I used the Anchor for that, and it did extremely well. I didn't even need to charge it for the entire weekend. I drained it down to about 50%, and I charged myself and my missus's phones. I used it to provide lighting while we were there. I used the AC function to run some lighting. So that was the inverter. So I ran my lighting with that for a while I was there, while I had disconnected the entire solar system. And it worked great. And it only discharged to 50% over a course of 3 nights. So very solid little product. And I'll be doing a review on it at some point when I get time to sit down and do some filming. But there we go. So far, really great experience. I emptied out my cabin, which yielded a whole ton of extra food and medical supplies and stuff. So I've now got to repurpose and reassign those to new places. But for now, they're all in storage. Although, sad news, I did have some thievery happen before I managed to get back up to the cabin. And I had about 600 watts worth of panel disappear. The savages cut the cables right off. So I managed to rescue 2 panels, one of which is going to need some repair. So I'll have to give that one some TLC and repair the MC4 connectors I got savagely cut. But that's all right. Karma will catch up to those clowns. In the meantime, I did manage to run the Furman dual fuel propane Jenny, and I used that to top up my cells before disconnecting everything so I could leave those in storage for the next few months and not worry about them. So that's a good practice, folks. If you're going to leave your batteries sitting around for a little while, you might need to, charge them up before you put them away and maintain them over time if you're going to do something like that. If you've got batteries on standby, it's always a good idea to top those up on a regular basis. So I did that. And I guess that kind of leads into our main topic, doesn't it?
That's a great segue into the main topic, which happens to be solar power. And we're expanding on it because it was a pretty popular episode last time you talked about it. And you had more stuff you wanted to talk about.
Well, yeah, I think we kind of skipped over and we made a short conversation of the whole inverter story. And I think that's worth discussing because inverters can be used in the mobile sense and as well in the static, stationary sense. And so by that, I mean is that if you've got a boat or if you've got a vehicle, what you have there is a mobile power of a power source. It's a mobile power source and it produces DC, direct current. And with that, you can power a whole lot of stuff, including your phone, and lots of laptops and tablets now can be powered using direct current. But when you want to start using larger appliances or other more complex appliances that might not be available in direct current, you kind of start to reach out for something that will take that 12-volt power and produce 115 to 120 volt alternating current. And that's where the inverter comes in. Your inverter is what allows you to take that 12 or 24 volt DC power source or whatever direct current power source you have, whether it's 12, 24, 48 volts, etc. It will take that current and it will invert it. It's a process called inversion, and it inverts it into AC, alternating current, which can be carried a much longer distance. So the utility in that is that you've got the ability to generate the kind of current that you need whenever you need it in a portable manner. And so lots of vehicles now have a built-in inverter, right? So you might have an AC plug in the back of your pickup truck or maybe up front in your SUV so that you can power something in there, plug something in there. And you'll often notice that there is a current limitation on some of those plugs. And so that's something that's worth talking about too, because everything has a specification and everything has a limitation, right? And that goes down to the sockets in your wall, doesn't it? Right? Do you ever see a more than 2,000 watt appliance that you can plug into your regular 115 or 200 or 120 volt AC? I don't think so, right? It's typically about 1,500 watts. So the amount of work, electrical work that your device is doing is measured in power or watts, right? And it's the overall wattage that will dictate what kind of hardware and power you're going to need to provide to that device. So if you are powering something like a hair dryer or a coffee maker, which in the world of alternating current is pretty high draw, that's enough to come close to overwhelming a socket, a 115 to 120 volt socket with that kind of power. So if you've ever run a hair dryer or something of that high power nature, or high-end microwaves, right? High power microwaves, they'll draw about 1,500 watts as well. Sometimes you'll see the rest of the items that are on that house circuit dim down, like lighting, right? Well, that's a sign that you're drawing a lot on that circuit. And that's because the average house plug can only draw about 15 amps. So one of the things about all these current generating devices is that they're not 100% efficient. Neither are inverters. So what happens is, because of that not fully efficient state, you're never really going to draw a full 15 amps from a socket without running into other issues at some point, right? Heat in the wires, right? Your breaker's going to constantly be dripping off. So you've got to watch what power draw you're using in any sense, whether you're using a house device or house appliance, a house current, a house power source provided by a utility or a generator, or something that's coming from the solar world. So the solar world always will generate something that is DC, direct current, natively. And so the important thing for that is that you need an inverter to use that DC current and provide alternating current to other types of appliances you might have. So an example we have here in the chat that Patna Bunker states is water pumps. So let's talk briefly about water pumps. We do have water pumps that will operate on DC current, don't we? We do see those. I mean, I can buy a little water pump that will work with my battery drills and that will run on 20 volts. That is direct current. But that's not very efficient. I'm going to drain my DC batteries very quickly with that little pump. However, if I pick up an AC pump, an AC water pump, I will be able to draw a lot more water, pump a lot more water for less amount of current and overall work being done. So at that point, I might be tempted to run that on something that is AC, right? An AC pump. So with that AC, however, if I want to run that in a scenario when I don't have shore power or utility power, and if I'm powering myself, whether that's a generator or battery source, I need to provide AC current to that pump in order to have water, perhaps in my house. This is typically where you have AC pumps, right, in your house. So if you have a generator that's sitting around in order to power that pump, at some point or another, you're going to need to convert that generator power to some form of AC. It's probably what's going to be coming out of that generator. That's typically what you get, right? But you're going to want to make sure that the amount of draw that you're placing on that generator, the generator can produce it. Your average low-cost generator will provide anywhere from 1,500 to 6,000 watts of power, and those are portable generators. And so with a number of AC sockets on one of those, you can use that power to power some of your more essential items in the house, like that water pump I was just talking about. So
And
that's yes, go ahead, Jeff.
no, I was just going to say the one thing to remember too. I'm sure it's in your list, and you would have gotten to it, but is surge power or starting power. When those pumps start, they're going to draw more power to start them and get them going than to just run them. So when you're talking about the amount of power you need to incorporate that starting option. You can't say, and as an example, well, this pump takes 1,800 watts, so I have a 2,000 watt generator, I should be good. Probably not, because probably when you first start it and that initial kick in, you're probably going up to 21 or 2,200 watts to get it started, and then it'll run at 18.
You betcha, Jeff, and I'm glad you brought that up, because there's the runtime and there's the run power, and then there's startup power draw. And Jeff's absolutely right. Some devices will actually reach way farther than what Jeff's talking about. It depends on the type of device, right? So things that have a magnetic motor that needs to come up to speed, they will typically draw a whole lot of power initially when they get started, like a hair dryer, which does use a motor in order to blow air as well as a heating element, right? So that's a really great example as well. That pump is another one. Now, why that's important is that you need to size your generator and your inverter. So whether that's a generator or just an inverter that you are running, you need to size that to the load that you intend to put on it. So you can very, very easily overwhelm part of your system along the way, depending on how it is built. So a good example of this is if you've got a solar power system, because this is a little bit of a solar conversation, right? So perhaps you've got some batteries, maybe you've got them in parallel, and so you've got a 12-volt system, and then you've got an inverter set up on that, which is providing power. Okay, now you've got a power failure, so you slap your pump onto that, and you fire it up. Now, your pump says that it's going to draw about 1,500 watts. You check your generator, and your generator says it's good for 1,500 watts as well. You think you're good to go. You go to fire it up, and the generator makes a big beep, and nothing happens after that, right? So that's a good example of what will happen if you do not size your generator to the startup draw of the device. And like Jeff mentioned, you're not necessarily going to see this in the fine print of the device. You're going to either need to think about it ahead of time, or trial and error. Not so fun if you're out in the bush, right? So you're better off to use some sort of measurement. And what I like to gauge it is at least 50% of the draw you should have in overhead. At least that in overhead. So if I plan on running a 1,500 watt device, I want to have a minimum 2,500 watt overhead in order to be able to run that. So what I mean by overhead is, okay, maybe you've got more than just that pump running. Maybe you've got a string of lights going. Maybe you've got a Starlink up and running so that you can maintain internet connection. Well, now you've got a bit of a draw. And so if you add on to that a pump, you've got to account for the fact that you've got a running load to which you are now adding a device that needs additional power. Pat in a Bunker calls it surge power. Yeah, some people will call it surge power. You've got a number of different terms, which kind of makes it a little hard to, determine. Startup power is another term you're going to hear. But generally speaking, 50 to 60% is a good gauge to run with. So,
and one other thing while we're talking about that is, it's a good idea so say your power's been out for an hour and you start up your generator and you all of a sudden connect three, so say a fridge, a freezer, and maybe something else all at the same time. All three of those pumps are going to come on at the same time, and your surge power or your startup power is going to go through the roof. So do one at a time. Do your fridge, let it run for 5 minutes, plug your freezer in, let it run for 5 minutes, plug your next one in. Don't try and fire everything up at once, or as Gunny said, you're going to get that beep, 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 and it's going to go dead on you.
Yep. And then you'll curse and you'll think everything's broken and not working, but no, it's just you slapped everything and you trigger it all on together. And that's the big danger running everything on a power bar, isn't it, Jeff? Because you think everything is good. You don't like having to deal with multiple plugs when you fire everything up. I'm sorry, with generators, you have to watch how you load up that generator. So Jeff is right. Take the time to fire things up in sequence. And in fact, it's usually good practice if you're running a Jenny to give it a couple of minutes to run and warm up before you load it. Because the first few of power are kind of dirty coming out of any generating system. That includes your shore power, folks. So if you're used to having nice, clean turbine power from hydroelectric dams, please know that when those things come back online, the power is extremely dirty at first. And that's typically when things start to blow up and burn out and cause all kinds of problems. The other thing you should keep in mind is that the closer you are to the generation of that current, the dirtier it is as well. So if you live really close to the generating station, your power is going to be dirtier and going to have more spikes in it than, say, further down the line, right? So do keep that in mind. Conditions do change where you are, depending on where you are across that grid, right? And of course, depending on the quality of your local grid, this has a major, major effect. So keep that in mind. Of course, if you are off the grid, at that point, you have other elements that could be a choke point or a failure point. An example that I can cite for my own self is that when you're running some sort of inverter to a battery system, you ought to have a fuse. If you do not have a fuse, you are highly at risk, because any problem with your battery or, say, a bad short can cause that current to flow completely and fully across that device, right? And that can cause overheating in your wires. And of course, this can cause such fun things as fires, right? So we want to avoid this sort of thing. So keep in mind that if you've got, for example, a fuse, and the fuse is the weak link, your fuse is probably going to blow before anything else does as you're trying to run your loads. And so this happened to me. I had my very first system only had 100 amps. It had a 100 amp fuse between the batteries and the inverter. And for all my everyday needs, that was absolutely fine. The moment I tried to run a small vacuum on that, kaboom, I blew up the fuse and I had to replace the fuse. Thankfully, I had spares, right? So if you're buying fuse systems, make sure you have spares.
You were prepared.
I was prepared in this case, yes. I also had multiple
And you-
redundancies.
And you just recently became a prepper?
Yeah, I'm calling BS on that one. But the good news is like, well, the fuses are much cheaper than repairing the whole darn thing, right? And so yeah,
True.
just for the sake of having a few spare ones on you, at least you save yourself a lot of grief in the long term. So
Yes, and if I can share a piece of advice that came from one of my viewers, because I posted some of my videos, of course, on YouTube, and I had a really great viewer suggest that instead of using breakers that you can reset, don't use those. Right? He encouraged me to use good old burnout fuses, A&L fuses in my case is what I tend to favor. But whatever system you use, try to go with replaceable fuses. And case in point, it happened to me. I used an inexpensive Amazon resettable breaker, and the wire leading to that breaker started to heat up. And I don't know if it was the wire that overheated or the breaker that overheated, but the breaker started melting, and had it been an over voltage and overcurrent situation, it had melted in place. It would not have been able to actually break. I would have ended up having a fire. So that risk that I was warned about did materialize. It was just enough heat in that breaker, or it started to fail on its own. So I completely changed my design when I upgraded my system. I removed all types of those soft breakers, avoid them altogether, right? Just use a regular fuse, right? Even your household electrical breakers can go soft if they break too many times, right? If you trip a breaker 3 times on a household power line, you might want to be proactive and replace it, because you're likely to have problems with that breaker from there on in.
probably shouldn't
well,
duct tape it. I probably shouldn't duct tape it closed then either,
That's exactly what happened at my mom's trailer last year. Was the breaker kept tripping, and I said to the management at the park, I said, something's wrong with the breaker. Nope, it's your trailer. It's your trailer. Something's wrong in your trailer. You're blowing the breaker. And I went, look, we've never had a problem before. We did pop the breaker once. Said, I think the breaker's bad. Nope, it's your trailer. Blah, 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 blah. So anyways, on like Tuesday, when nobody was around, I shouldn't say this on a public thing, but that's okay. I turned the power to the panel off, and I just took that breaker out, put a brand new one in. I know how to do a little bit of electrical, and just put the brand new breaker in, turn the power back on. Never had a problem since.
Yeah, if you're experiencing weird issues and your breaker seems to be tripping a lot, whatever you do, don't eliminate the breaker as a cause, right? It could very well be the breaker, as Jeff described to you right there. It's a relatively inexpensive part to replace. And as Douglas mentions, fuses are way more frugal and less expensive to replace than equipment, and simpler, right? A fuse is how long of a process, right? I mean, even the most complex of fuse containers can be undone in 5 minutes or less and replaced. So it's worth designing your devices with A, fuses, and B, switches, right? You should be able to turn your power on or off, right? And I don't mean just a breaker, I mean an actual switch to turn your power on and off, and as well as a fuse. That's just for safety. So if it's got power coming to it, or if it's consuming power, it should be fused to the load that you expect to run on that. Your wire should be sized to the load you're expecting to run on that. So a good indicator when you're checking the design of your circuits is your wire handle, is your wire gauge to the level of your fuse? So what I mean by that is, if you have a 5 amp fuse on a circuit, do you have wiring that can handle 5 amps? Because if you don't, I can tell you that your wire might be an issue before the fuse actually goes off. And now you've got a melty problem, right? And melty leads to fires. And fires
Just
are
let the smoke out. You find out how everything runs, right?
That's right. Now, there are times when fire can be good. If you're in a survival situation and you really need fire quickly, you can short a lithium battery, and man, you're going to have yourself a spark and a fire.
Probably not suggested, though.
Maybe just the 9-volt and steel wool. Maybe just leave it at that.
But not all.
If you want to be boring, I guess. Yeah.
Right.
And obviously, I think this goes without saying, because this did happen to a friend of mine. If you blow your fuse or you blow your breaker or something like that, don't just put a bigger fuse in there or a bigger breaker.
No.
Well, actually, it was his significant other, but it doesn't matter. Blew a fuse, and there just happened to be a fuse there. She just put the fuse in. It was a 15 that blew, and she put a 25 in, and it melted the wiring and started a small fire. So don't
Let the smoke out.
Are they
whatever
still
fuse
together?
you take out or breaker you take out, put the same size in.
Are the people still together?
No.
Yes, if you're building your own or you're just throwing things together, just pay attention, please, folks, to that current draw. And I know low powered systems, right? Low power DC systems, there's not a whole lot of risk. There's enough juice in a 12 volt system to start a fire anytime you're sloppy. Please remember that, friends. I can't stress that enough. So if you're ever wondering, do I have a thick enough gauge in my system? So here's a few tips for you. All right, here's a few tips to go and look at what you've got going on to see if it's safe. Most properly vetted switches, and I mean from a good manufacturer, will have some sort of amperage and voltage rating right on the switch. Right. So if you order a batch of switches from any not shady manufacturer, you should have markings on there that tell you what voltage, what amperage it can handle. Then you should also know what your current draw is. What are your devices going to draw along that circuit? Make sure that the switches and the fuses are rated appropriately. Again, remember your startup current draw. So if you're designing a 15 amp system, well, remember that 15 amp draw, you might want to fuse for more than 15 amps to give it a little bit of fudge factor, right? Maybe give yourself a 20 amp fuse if you expect to draw 15 amps, right? But remember that if you oversize your fuse, you might not catch a problem fast enough, and you might have some undue heat in the system. That's what happens when you have a short. You'll create heat somewhere, and that heat will very quickly burn through insulating sheaths on those wires, or it will overheat the insulators in the circuits that are built in there to try and prevent that sort of thing from occurring. Right, so that's what happens when you have a short, and eventually you get too much heat and you have a fire. And sometimes the amount of power going through is just so high that things do unexpected stuff like blow up. Right, and so it's no joke. If all of this kind of cobbling things together gives you the willies and scares you, just get a sealed system, an all-in-one system like the Jackery that. Was it Ian that was talking about the Jackery unit? I believe so. Anchor, solid little product. I can recommend that already. And you can rest assured that the engineers have made sure that they're not going to deliver you an electrical bomb, right?
Yeah,
What's the fun in that, though?
Once those lithium-ion or lithium phosphate batteries go, it's you're not putting it out for love or money. So they probably over-engineer things a little bit, I'm thinking.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing to keep in mind is nobody wants to get sued. So when they're selling you a product that's going to run in multiple different places under different environmental conditions, they're going to generally test them to some degree. But again, is that something you should trust? I'm a trust but verify kind of guy, so I look at reviews. But even then, weird things can happen, right? When things are made through robotics, you do have a certain higher reliability, but is there quality control built in? Right? Robotics can make stuff, but do you have quality control? That's when humans grab something in a batch and do quick checks. Does the company you deal with have good customer service? These are all factors in what you're going to choose. If you're building by yourself, do your research. I bought Eve cells, which are considered really good cells to build with if you're going to build your own. The BMSs that I picked up for my build were JBD, and they're not bad. Are they top of the line? Could I have gone with higher end? Sure. But at the time I was on a budget, so I was working within my budget. And that is something that should be brought to the table. When we talk about lithium systems, you're going to pay. You're talking about high-end inverter chargers. It's going to cost you. The cheap stuff that you buy online or on Amazon, well, just be careful, right? Read reviews, look at tear downs. If you can see tear down articles or tear down videos, that's a really great start to see if you can trust a product. At least do that if you're going to buy inexpensive and build it into your system. Or like some of us are starting to do with the quality of manufactured systems is getting really up there. And the warranties are solid. I got a 5-year warranty on the little Anchor Solex system. And the beautiful thing about that is now I can transport that anywhere and it's ready to go. I plugged it into the wall and it was charged in half an hour flat. Right? So there's some benefit to these sealed systems. You don't have to worry about doing all of the calculations, all of the research. If any of you have looked up an ampacity chart from the National Electrical Code? So that's a fun little thing. I might put one up here on screen for you all, just to share that with you as a last little piece of advice. If you are going to go ahead and design your own systems, what you're going to want to do is at least consult an ampacity chart. And so what you can see here is an example of an ampacity chart. An ampacity chart is usually a table, and I've got another example here. So it's usually a table, and I'm going to just blow up the volume a little bit here so you can all see a little bit better. And typically you're going to have a table that shows you here we've got copper conductors versus aluminum conductors. And you'll see what rating they are given. So conductors are usually given a temperature rating. The highest quality cabling, of course, will be able to handle higher temperature ratings. And this is a specification you can look up on your cable if it's quality cable. If it's not quality cable, you might not see any rating on it at all. So I'll let you know what I think of that. I don't trust it whatsoever. I like a cable that's got at least some sort of marking I can consult. But here, let's pick an example. Let's say I've got some 4-gauge wiring. 4-gauge is pretty common. You can buy that in most automotive stores. So 4-gauge here, if it's 90-degree rated 4-gauge cabling and it's copper, I can draw approximately 95 amps through that, 95 amps. If we're talking aluminum conductors, we've got 75 amps. So that's just a really, really useful measurement to be able to grab. So you can confirm, okay, I'm fused appropriately. So if I've got 4-gauge and I've got a 100 amp fuse, what do you think is going to happen if I'm drawing at full power? I'm going to experience some heat before my fuse goes off. And that's exactly what happened in my case. I had a little bit of heat that affected my soft breaker, and it ended up not causing a fire, but it started melting things. So you can look up these ampacity charts all over the web, right? You'll find that the various different vendors of cabling and other accessories that you can wire in. They're going to produce those charts and make them available for you and put their own branding on them, but they're all from the National Electrical Code. You will have some that will even illustrate the thickness and the difference in thickness between all those different conductors. And so if you're more of a visual person, that could be very useful. So make sure to consult at least one of those if you've got a homegrown system, and verify that all the switches, all the wiring, all the fuses that you have along the line are sized appropriately based on your draw. So if you know that you're going to draw 10 amps with a pump, well, that's great. Now you can go and look at your wiring and make sure that everything is good there. So those are a couple of really big safety points I wanted to pass along when it comes to inverters, because you can really easily overwhelm your overall system if you've got an inverter that's at all inefficient. And that's one last little thing I want to leave you with about inverters. There is always some inefficiency that occurs in your system when you're inverting current. So by that I mean, if I have a 10 amp draw on 115, 120 volts AC on an inverter, I am actually drawing a fair bit more than that from my batteries and overall power. And the inefficiency is going to be given off or translated to heat. And so as Jeff Locke mentions here in our chat, an inverter is typically going to have some sort of means to deal with that heat, because it's not your friend. Heat is what usually fries things, right? Heat is what makes solar panels inefficient. Heat makes circuits inefficient. So there's ways to counter that. One, use high heat wiring. That will reduce your chances of incidents. Two, know your power loads. Three, know what your power loads are going to do under different heat conditions, right? Because the heat conditions can affect your power loads as well. And size your systems appropriately, right? There is a point of inefficiency, though. If I'm only going to draw 10 amps and I size a system to draw 200 amps, man, I'm seriously overpaying for my solution, right? So you want to consider current and
you're saying, Claude, that size matters? Just want to confirm that.
you beat me to it.
Well, when you're handling loads, it's very important to manage the size there, so you don't.
Oh boy.
Oh, I love it.
Wow.
Yes, size matters, but sizing for the entire enchilada, just like mama and papa, ideally are sized in a compatible manner. Man, I'm gonna get zapped off here, but
yeah, just keep digging. Someone's gonna make a comment.
You also want to size your power delivery to your power draw, and you want it to fit, right? Because the danger of going overboard is you're paying too much and you're adding too much complexity, right? And there is something against that too. There's a beautiful thing of keeping it simple. So please do keep that in mind as well. The more complex your system, the more chances you're going to overlook something, or a small detail might escape you. Ask me how I know.
How do you know?
How do you know?
If things get melty and hot, and they introduce additional problems you hadn't anticipated.
And out comes the smoke.
Yes, and smoke is bad. Smoke is just
Every
bad.
machine is a smoke machine if you use it wrong enough.
Oh, 100%.
Every machine runs on smoke, and it stops running when you let it out.
Oh, awesome. Can we convert smoke to electricity?
Probably could.
Where's
There's
our
got to be a way.
gasifier fans? Where's our gasifier fans?
I'll say gasifier once more, and Scott will appear.
I'm gonna have to test that soon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the biggest advice I can give on inverters and DC systems is watch your heat, watch your power draw.
There's Scott.
There we go.
It worked.
He showed up. It worked. He was like, oh man, we don't need no back signal.
Nope.
Just awesome. Just awesome. What a way to wrap it up. I don't have much more to add unless you guys have some questions or we got questions with our listeners.
Well, I fully admit I didn't listen to the first half of this episode last week, so my apologies. But battery, as far as tying in the batteries with the heat generation and everything else, did you guys cover that last time?
We didn't talk a lot about heat and batteries, but we probably should. We did talk about cold and lithium batteries and how the cold negatively affects your lithium batteries when discharging below -20. So if your batteries are lithium and they're at below -20 discharging, you're probably going to damage them. If you're trying to charge lithium-based batteries at anything under 0 degrees Celsius, you're probably damaging them and reducing their lifespan as well. So if you're designing or working with a system that you are intending to use in sub-0 degree weather, you're probably better off with good old-fashioned lead-acid batteries for your storage. Otherwise, you might find that good old-fashioned fuel generators will give you your highest reliability under those temperature conditions. I had to heat my lithium batteries up with a nice fire for at least 3 hours before I even dared to fire up my BMSs and run those batteries. So there's that. On the other end, if it's very hot, you're probably going to have issues there too. Heat is your enemy when it comes to electricity, when it comes to batteries, whether you're talking DC, when you're talking AC, whatever. Heat is definitely your enemy. So it's usually most efficient in the cold. And so if you just keep that in mind, right? If you've got a lot of heat or vibration in your environment, you're going to have a hard go with those fancy new lithium systems. That beautiful little Anchor Solix I was telling you about, it's going to be useless if I take it outside and I let it cool down to -20 degrees. It'll probably peter out on me before it hits -15, to be honest, because sensitive little LCD screens, they tend to do terribly at anything under -5, right? They start to act funny, things don't show up. Different components will behave differently at different temperatures if they're not built for that cold. So yes, heat's your enemy, but dampness and condensation are also very large enemies. And so if you're trying to operate an electrical system that's not designed to run and it generates heat, but you're partially in the cold, man, you can get weird stuff going on there as well. Try to run your cell phone outside, right? How long does it last?
Not long.
Well, if only the government knew that about EV cars and how basically 98% of Canada is pretty much useless for them. But that's fine.
Yeah, let's
hold on.
Let's not talk reality though. Marketing is truth, right?
That's right. But also, I was just going to mention too, if you're actually cycling the batteries, meaning like you're charging the batteries at the same time that you're drawing from the batteries, it can obviously generate a lot of heat, which increases resistance, which of course turns into this vicious cycle. So one thing to worry about, thermal runaway, you got to worry about that, right?
Let's pause and talk about that. Ian, you've got a really good one there. When you are charging and discharging from the battery at the same time, you now have an added load. You have additive loads because you are charging, you are drawing through that wire. And because you're discharging, you're also drawing through that wire. You're now drawing twice as much. And that's how you can sometimes get thermal runaways. Something gets too hot, that heat gets to the battery system. And once it gets to that battery system, if it's lithium, man, you got bad news. You got bad news on your hands.
Yeah, early airplanes, when they had the first lithiums show up for those things, they end up having the batteries burn through the bottom of the airplanes and fall out.
Man, that's a bad show.
Because they're drawing and charging at the same time. They had no idea, right? So this is back in the day. But yeah, it was quite the thing with the thermal runaways. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on too. And so if you have a battery temperature gauge, that also actually can come in handy in certain cases too.
Isn't that how they make the chemtrails?
I can't talk about that.
Okay, just figured I'd ask.
Yeah, we're not clear. So yes, do keep. That's a great reminder from me, and do keep in mind the draw and the charging over the same system are additive. And to that point, one of the inverter chargers I've built into my last system, it had super oversized cables, but it was capable of handling 3,000 watts of draw while charging. So just imagine that's at 12 volts. That's a fair amount of current. In order to be able to safely draw and charge and run everything all at the same time, this thing recommended, if I'm not mistaken, it was AUT1 cables. We're talking really, really expensive cabling here, right? But that's what it
Gauge
took.
1.
What's that?
Gauge 1, like 1 gauge.
No, AUT1. So 0/1, which is
Even thicker.
quite thicker, yeah. So
Like baby's arm thick.
beyond
Yeah.
zero gauge, you've got, so beyond your smallest 2 gauge, you go down to 0 gauge, then that's considered 1 aught. Then you've got 2 aught, which is a bit thicker yet, 2/0. Then you've got 3 aught, and then you've got 4 aught, which I think is so far the biggest I have seen, and it's pretty big. 4 aught is huge. So they recommended 1 aught minimum. I decided to play it safe. I went with 4 aught, anyway, it's really high-end cabling. And so if you're playing with high wattage with 12 volt systems, just be ready to fork out with your wires, and don't be cheap. If you're charging and discharging over that circuit at the same time, that is an additive current load. You're going to heat up. So it pays to pay attention. Don't skimp. And again, if all this makes you nervous, get the sealed all-in-one systems, and I got to vouch for them. If these had been around when I was building, I probably could have saved myself a lot of trouble, but they were still extremely expensive when I was building my systems. And so being frugal, I decided a little bit of handiwork was best. Although it did take me a lot of time, and there was a lot of research involved in ensuring that I was sizing everything appropriately. So if you've got time, do it. But if all that makes you nervous, sealed all-in-ones. Douglas here's got some
seek
great,
somebody out that knows what they're doing.
yeah.
Learn.
Doug has a bit of experience here as well. He chooses 12 volt for amateur radio and 48 volt for house power. I would agree for anything that is larger than a small shack. Like I had a 16 by 12 and a 12 volt system is going to be okay in that, because you've got about a 23-foot maximum length on your wires before you start to get attenuation. For a house, you should probably go 48 volt. For a larger vehicle like a truck, then 24 volt is worth it, because you can go beyond the 23-foot length and distance on those. And that's just pure DC. And why is that important? And again, this is maybe another little pro tip, I suppose. When you go long, you've got attenuation, and that adds to the overall inefficiency of your system. So if you're able to increase the voltage, you can go longer with your cabling. So there's some advantage to doing that. However, if you do have native 12 volt devices that you need to run on a 48 volt, you're going to need to add some circuitry to that. You're going to need to add a component, a step down converter that will take your 48 volts or your 24 volts and drop it down to 12 in order to use that. And it's really important to keep that in mind. There is inefficiency in 12 volt systems in that if you want to go long, you're going to get a lot of power drop very quickly. So keep that in mind. We got a great question here from Doug. How do those systems like the 6000 XP work? Well, I'm not familiar with that one. How about our other panelists here?
I got nothing.
I have no idea what that is. Who makes it?
No idea.
I seem to have quickly found something here made by EG4. It's an all-in-one off-grid inverter. So this looks like an inverter charger. That's exactly what it is. So it's an inverter charger. So an inverter charger is exactly like what I just described. It's a device that has inverting built into it. So it will take your 48 volts in this case. Does it work just on 48? Yeah, it's a 48 device, but will also charge to 140 amps, which is an astounding amount of current, actually. So with a device like that, you could probably chain a whole pile of high current panels and quickly charge up your battery cells. So it being 48 volts, you could build up your batteries there with 4 12-volt systems, 4 sealed 12-volt batteries. You could put those in series, and that would give you a 48-volt base voltage system. And that device there, you could wire into that. And with that device, you could not only deliver 6,000 watts, 6 kilowatts of current, which is quite a bit of current to your house, but you could also charge that all with one device. So what that means is that you could have power coming into that. When power resumes, it would automatically charge your battery storage system, and you could have it always on, and it could just power your loads through your battery device. Or if you got shore power, you could probably configure it so that the batteries that you do have are constantly charged and left on standby, so that the moment that the shore power does quit, you flip over seamlessly to your batteries. So this is very similar to the inverter charger I ran in terms of concept. So it's designed to be always on and deliver and assure you of having power. And Mel, in our comments here, Melissa's got a great question. Would this lessen your battery life with a constant charge running on them like that? So in the case of a not intelligent charging system, yes, you're going to lessen your battery life by having it constantly charged. But with an intelligent off-grid device like this, you're going to be able to configure it with set points so that you dictate when it does kick in and start charging and when it doesn't. And so you can also ensure that you can tune it for extended battery life versus battery capacity. And that's what I tend to do with my systems. I tend to tune them for battery life over battery capacity, mostly because I don't want to wear down my batteries too early and quickly. With sealed devices, you might not have that option. With all-in-one devices, this might not be something that's tunable for you as an end user. But when you build your own, you absolutely can. So that's what I can tell you on that without us diving into serious spec verifications and spec checks and manual reading. Sometimes you can have different kinds of tunings, and it depends on the device. So in the case of my Renogy charger, I could tune it to some degree. I could say, I want this much, when I've got shore power, I want this much battery charging current versus load current, ongoing load current. And I could decide what my charging profile was. So they're quite capable devices. Because they are mostly all going to be MPPT, maximum power point tracking devices, they're going to tend to run at highest efficiency with good panels, because what they will do, what MPPT devices do, is they will constantly monitor the amount of power being generated by your solar panels. They will adjust the charging based on that current power that it's able to obtain from those panels. So it's a more intelligent system. What do I consider high voltage versus low voltage is a good question. I'll use the definition that electricians use maybe. When it comes to DC, most electricians will consider anything over 48 volts to be high voltage. When it comes to AC, that's not my wheelhouse. I know electricians who will say that 240 volts or anything under 600 is low voltage when it comes to AC. So it depends on the electrician you're talking to, I think. But I talked to a lot of industrial electricians who are used to dealing with 25 kilovolts and higher. So when it comes to DC systems, again, it depends on the tolerances of the components that you build into it. Right? I see here in the chat, we've got nominal voltages, which is what your 12-volt systems, your nominal voltage is going to be typically between 12.8 and 13.3 volts. For automotive systems, it's not out of the ordinary to see them go up to the 14.1, 14 volts while they are charging, right? So remember that there are charging voltages, there are native voltages, there are spec voltages, and you're going to have some variability between them. So as Doug mentions here, a lead acid system will tend to sit charged at 13.8 volts. A lithium system will typically can go to 14.2 volts undercharge, 14.5, 14.6, depending on your BMS tuning. And panels vary immensely. You're going to have panels that go native 12 volts all the way into 75 volts. It depends on the panel. It depends on the systems. You can find specs for everything. And I've seen panels that deliver as low as 30 watts and that are fairly portable at 12 volts. So it really depends. I always say check your specs. And the other little reminder I will tell you is with your any inverter charger or any charger, when you are purchasing or fitting out this charger to your batteries, double check that the charger has a mode for your type of battery. So if you've got lead acid batteries versus AGM versus lithium, that's important for the charger to know. If your charger is not necessarily compatible with lithium, you may want to set that aside. If you're working with modern lithium batteries, you could damage your lithium. Generally, almost all of the chargers will be compatible with lead acid and AGM batteries of some kind, and more they are fully lithium compatible and configurable for lithium as well. So keep that in mind. The new charger generations are quite smart. Even the newer pulse width modulation PWM chargers can also be configured for lithium versus sealed versus plain old lead acid, right? So the devil's in the details. I was taught when I was wearing green RTFM, folks. So read the manual. All right, read the manual. And
you
I
dropped
know
the word there. You dropped the word there, but that's okay.
We use it as starter, but please read the manual in case of doubt, right? That's an old habit of mine from the computer world. What's the model number? And I go online right away and look up an installer's manual, spec manual, something to give me a clue. Because there's little details in there that you won't see necessarily on the sales spec sheet, the front of the page, so to speak. Right? Things like startup voltages, like Jeff was discussing and reminded us of. Right? These are things that you might not see until you go digging in the user manual or the spec sheet. But when it looks all pretty, they'll tell you, oh, it's a 2,000 watt device. But look in the fine print, ooh, it might draw more when you're trying to start it up. So little details like that are important. Little things like temperatures, run temperatures, charging conditions, all of that stuff. It's worth double checking. If you're not sure, go and put the thing online and do a search. Right? When I am unsure about a component, I can go online and do a search, and chances are somebody else has tried to work with it and has some experience with it. So if you're unsure, ask a friend, ask a pro. Somebody else has a lot more experience than you doing it if you feel you don't. And so you can find a lot of information out there. That's what I got for you on solar. What else do we have our panel?
I think we're running long anyway right now. Probably move on to a third if we had to.
Well, that was fantastic information. I know very little about solar, so I'm just sitting here being a sponge, absorbing it all.
Well, these are just my little practical tips from my experiences, my adventures off grid. And I'm
Mhm.
still having fun with it, but I gotta admit, these new systems where all you gotta do is fire it up and plug it in. Yeah, I gotta give them props. Pretty cool stuff.
It's nice, but knowing the theory and having the knowledge behind it to set it up yourself is always good to have as well, right? The plug and play is always a nice thing after you have that knowledge.
Yes, yes. And with plug and play, the nice thing about that is if you're wondering about your solar panels, chances are the plug and play device you're buying has a solar panel model matched to it. And that's the case with my little Anchor Solix. I bought a little 100-watt panel set that works perfectly with it. And so there's almost no chance of me blowing up my little unit when I'm using the compatible solar panel. When you're building your own, that's when you can run into issues. But if you take your time, look at the specs, do your reading, do your research, you can do really well. And I did okay, and I was on a budget, and I didn't blow myself up. But I did learn some best practices along the way. Avoid those soft breakers, right? Just go for fuses. Don't mess around. They're less expensive, and you can buy spares. For the price of one soft breaker, I can buy 3 replaceable fuses, and I'm better off with that. Safer, and that's the way to go. So those are some of the tips I can give you. Other than that, I'm going to give a shout out to Do-It-Yourself Solar Power by Will Prowse. I used his Do-It-Yourself Solar Forum quite a bit to up my learning all of my own, and I did look at a couple of his videos to get myself started. I did a whole lot more reading other than that, though, and I encourage you all to do the same as well. It's very enriching to be able to master these things on your own with just a little bit of knowledge. Like I said in earlier episodes, my level of extent of experience until I started trying it on my own was playing with DC systems, building stereos in my car. So if I was able to do it, I know way more competent, smarter people can do it better than I. I've used a lot of their experiences to get myself started. So if some of this knowledge and experience can help, great. I love to hear from others. So if any of our listeners have had their great experiences, hey, please join me in the Discord channels. I invite you to join us and share your experiences with us. And man, maybe we can have you on the show, talk about your experiences building and maintaining solar systems. Lots of fun.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks for the a whole pile of information. That's I'm gonna have to go back over this episode and the last one and, and take down some notes and really dive into this, because it's an interesting topic and one that a lot of preppers are obviously interested in, because it's a fairly popular episode that we've done, and lots and lots of information. So appreciate you taking the time to put it all together.
My pleasure. A lot of this was on the fly tonight, so I want to thank all my co-panelists who throw great curveballs and questions and comments out there, and keep the good discussions going. Same with our listeners.
If anyone's curious, there's literally 2 sentences in the show notes. So yes, it was it was all on the fly. It was
and if you did, if Frugal Gunny hadn't shown up tonight, we'd probably be screwed. So
it's true. We probably just hold a couple light bulbs up and then call it a show. All right, with that, let's move into the podcast challenge, shall we?
All right, so it doesn't really matter what it is, but start yourself off with a mini solar system, even if it's a Canadian Tire kit, anything to allow you to start efficiency of a solar panel, even if it's just a tiny, used car battery to play with for energy storage. I think just start yourself off with a bare bones basics, like Claude said, learn as you go, and I think build yourself up from there. I think that's a good challenge as any.
Yeah,
fantastic. So we've got some upcoming events. The 2025 annual Preppers Meet, July 10th to 13th at the Slovenian Hunters and Anglers Club in Alliston, Ontario. So it's coming up. Put it in your calendar, because it's going to sneak up, and winter will blow by us here, and then it'll be time for the annual Preppers Meet again. So get that in the calendar again, July 10th to the 13th, 2025.
I have an alarm on my calendar that says to me, January 4th, I think we're back to work, to book those days off because I can't book a
Nice.
year in advance.
There you go. Jeff, you got a weather blurb.
I do. Just before I do that, Pat in the bunker says, my brother's an electrical engineer. He'd love to come on. Have him reach out to us. Feedback at prepperpodcast.ca. And
Absolutely.
I see somebody just typed that in the chat. So
love
have
it.
him reach out to us. We'd love to have him on.
Definitely.
Yes, sir.
So on the weather blurb, so it's been a busy and devastating few weeks for the folks in Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. As I mentioned in the news section, many areas in especially Western North Carolina still don't have access to safe water. A lot of them don't have power. So, things, it hasn't been a good season. The hurricane season wasn't what we thought. It's been, the amount of storms that we thought we were going to get didn't materialize, but the ones we got did do a significant amount of damage, loss of life, property, etc. So it was good and bad. Just when it appeared things were quieting down and I kind of wasn't really paying attention, 2 more storms popped up. I looked one day and all of a sudden there's a hurricane and a tropical storm on the map. And I'm like, what? Where did they come from? Because 2.5 days earlier, there was a 30% chance of the storms, but they got into the warm waters. I've said that before many times. Warm waters like throwing gasoline on a fire, and they just got rapid intensification from those warm waters. Good news on one side, storms are not expected to impact the U.S. Hurricane Oscar, unfortunately, is going to, or is right now, hitting the east coast of Cuba. Like I said, they don't have electricity, they don't have communication, unless they've got some kind of a backup radio or something. They're not even going to know what's coming, and that's really bad. So, but it will, once it makes landfall, it's going to make a hard right turn, and it's projected to head back out to sea. So it's not going to be anything for the U.S., which is good news. Nadine, was a tropical storm. I looked a couple minutes ago. It's actually now just a tropical depression. It's moving across the southern tip of Mexico and not doing much damage. Outside of that, we've kind of had a nice stretch of weather all across the U.S. and Canada, except for our poor people over in BC that got the atmospheric river. There are a few storms popping up today in New Mexico that have caused some floods, some flash flood warnings to come out. But all in all, the last 3 or 4 days, we went over 48 hours and did not have a single severe weather warning in the lower 48. No severe thunderstorm warnings. No, there were other type of warnings like a flash freeze or, red flag warnings for possible fires, that kind of thing. But in terms of severe weather, we went well over 48 hours without a single warning for all of the U.S. South of the border, and that's basically unheard of. So things have been well. That's going to change midweek. We are going to see another cool down. It's going to usher in some more rain. It doesn't look like it's going to last long in the mid-U.S. We'll get another warm-up starting around the 25th of October. That's basically it. If you have any interest in that, obviously, I cover a lot of it on the Discord. So if you're not there, like Gunny said, get over to the Discord, join up, and live the life.
Live the life. Very nice.
Love it.
I like
All right. Deal of the week.
All right, we got some Prepper Tupperware on sale. So if you guys are familiar with the 762x39 wooden crates, they got the plastic version of those that are a nice size for holding like ham radio gear and all sorts of soldering equipment and I don't know, solar equipment and everything else. Yeah, so they're like 50% off right now. So they're the regular $30, but they're on for 15 at Cabela's. The links in the show notes. And also, if you're feeling spendy still, Jackery.ca has a big sale on their Jackery 1000 version 2. It's about $400 off, I think, right now. So it's if you're gonna grab one, now's a good time. They're not cheap, but they like you said, they're like Frugal Gunny was saying. You can basically get it on a really steep discount, and it's an all-in-one system. So at a time.
Awesome. Cool. Well, with that, first off, I'm going to go spend some money because those crates are always good to have extras of. And I'll bring episode number 250 of the Canadian Prepper podcast to an end. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or of course your favorite podcast app. I'm pretty sure we're on all of them now. Please do submit a review wherever you do listen, because it does encourage the algorithms to promote us only slightly, and then we drop back down because, well, algorithms.
Yeah, we do record these shows live on YouTube and Facebook. If you want an early peek at the shows, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Canadian Prepper Podcast, and click the notifications tab. That will give you an alert when we're going live. Anybody needs to reach out or wants to contact me, it's feedback@prepperpodcast.ca, or as I said, I'm frequently on the Discord.
If anybody wants to drop a line, it's batbradcpp@gmail.com, and I too every so often am on the Discord.
And I'm the Frugal Gunny. You can find me on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, Instagram, and the CPP Discord.
So you can reach Ian directly by emailing me at theislandofretreat@gmail.com. You can also occasionally find me on Canadian Patriot Podcast, which is live on YouTube Monday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern, on iTunes, and I'm also on the Discord app for both CPPs. There you can find us discussing why government waste and general degradation of society, as we checking out this prepper lifestyle thing.
It's good to hear you're only casually on the other CPP as well. You're not just ignoring us. That's good.
Equally disdainful of both of you. So
fair enough. Please check out Rapid Survival at rapidsurvival.com. You can get me there on the live chat. You can also email me at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. So thanks for joining us. Until next time, be prepared, stay safe,
and keep learning.